Hello and welcome to my Stamina Templar Two-Hander build guide for the Wrathstone patch. I've been toying around with Stamina Templar for a little bit, and I tried to come up with an interesting two-hander rotation and setup that's basically pretty flexible in terms of what it does. It deals a lot of DPS. It does 50k plus easily in a situation where you got major fracture available. So this setup is pretty simple. We're gonna go through two different setups that you can use. One is basically with Rearming Trap using Minor Force from that, and the other one is using Toglin's Warband and putting Brawler where Rearming Trap is. So you can basically just decide which one suits your situation best. If you can rely on a healer, one is going to be better. If you want to get a little bit of survivability, and the other one is going to be better. Alright, let's start with the gear. Gear-wise, we have a couple options here. Generally, for single target DPS, as on most other build guides, you want the perfect Reliquant set. If you don't have the perfect one, you can also go for the non-perfect, but you lose a little bit of DPS from not having the 5-piece stamina bonus. In application, if you want to be more the raid buff guy, you can also use a War Machine instead. Something like this here, War Machine. It's also quite nice. You lose single target DPS, but you buff your allies with Major Slayer on every second rotation, which is basically roughly like between 35 to 40% Major Slayer uptime, which is also quite nice to have. So as a main 5-piece, either go with Reliquant or War Machine. As a monster set, I'm going with Stormfist. Stormfist is pretty nice because it has this 1-piece recovery bonus, which basically gets this setup to the perfect sweet spot for sustain, so that you can sustain in longer fights if you have orbs available. If you don't have orbs available, just simply switch the food to something that gives you sustain. Artaeum is expensive, so you can also use Dubious Throne if you want, which gives you a little bit more sustain, but you lose a little bit of health. As you can see, the stats on this build through the gear are pretty decent. You have 18.5k health without Aben, without minor toughness, so you're going to be sitting at a comfortable 22k health-ish in raids, which is basically very survivable due to being an orc here on this build. The maximum stamina is roughly 36.6k, also very high, quite nice. Weapon damage would also be getting to quite high numbers. So you can see it's a pretty decent build. The resistances are also quite nice. This is without major resistances, so basically you can put this down and you have like 25k spell resistance, 23k physical, but this basically depends on the trial environment that you're in. Now, monster set is Stormfist. You can also use Valley Dread and Sustain Food. This also works, but Stormfist plus Blue Food basically yielded the best results for me than Reliquant 5-piece, and I used the Deadly set on the front bar with 3 jewels and a Greatsword in Infused with a weapon damage enchantment on. I do it this way basically. The jewelry is not bloodthirsty. Probably with bloodthirsty I could get out more DPS even on this build, because we're using an execute ability, but I simply did not have the transmute stones to do it. So if you want to get more DPS in, you can probably use bloodthirsty too. We're using a Greatsword because on a two-hander it's simply the most consistent damage increase you can have on the front bar. So basically you get that, I think it's 6%. Let me just check it again. It is 6% from the Greatsword. Basically I just noticed that I don't have this passive, which doesn't matter. This Greatsword gives you 6% damage done, so it buffs all the damage you do, even proc sets and stuff. So this is basically very nice. Since we're using Reliquant, it gets buffed by the Greatsword, and Stormfist gets buffed by the Greatsword as well. Now we're using the Deadly set because it synergizes very well with the kit that the Stamplar has, because the spammable biting jabs is considered damage over time. So as long as you channel this spammable will also get boosted by this 5-piece set. It also boosts pretty much any other damage over time ability that we have besides Blazing Spear. So Rearming Trap, the dot component that it has, gets buffed. Endless Hail, Razor Caltrops, Poison Injection, and the damage over time effect from Empowering Sweep. All of these get buffed by the Deadly Strike set, and we're using another one that's basically using an effect that enchantments have. Damage proc enchantments inherit the damage type of the ability that they proc off. So basically, if we put a absorb stamina enchantment on the back bar and have it proc off Endless Hail, it will get buffed by the Deadly Strike set on the front bar. So basically, if we have that thing proccing off the Endless Hail, we put this down and have our enchantment proccing on the enemy, swap to the front bar, it will get boosted by the 6% from the Greatsword and the 14% from the Deadly Strike set as well, because it is considered damage over time. So this absorb stamina enchantment can actually hit pretty hard. I'm putting this on the back bar for that reason. Usually you want to have like a Berserker enchantment on the back bar, because then you can basically get 100% uptime on it, and on the front bar you can control where the damage proc enchantments hit. But basically I found this just to be a bigger damage increase than to swap these enchantments around, simply because you still get, when you look at this, Berserker is still 77% up. I don't know why it says 96%, but it should be 77. So you don't really lose a lot of weapon damage from this. It's like 100 weapon damage that you lose by putting this on the front bar, but you gain so much sustain back from the back bar. So basically that's why I chose to put the absorb stamina enchantment on the back bar. So this is basically the one setup that we're going to be using. The second setup is simply switching out Deadly Strike, the Deadly Strike set, with Sockvince. Sockvince is a very nice addition that came in with Wrathstone. This one basically increases your critical chance by 1290, stacks up very fast, and it lasts 10 seconds. So even in our rotation, at every second rotation we stay on our back bar for quite a while, because we reactivate Restoring Focus and Empowering Sweep. So during that time, Sockvince will stay up, while any other set like Advancing Yokida and Deadly Strike will fall off. Basically, Deadly Strike falls off as soon as you swap to the back bar, so this one stays up all the time, even if you cast 5 abilities on the back bar, which is why we're going to use it here, because it's very easy to keep up and it yields nice damage, and it also allows us to not use Rearming Trap on the front bar and get more survivability in by using Brawler, add more AoE as well. So this is basically the gear loadout enchantment wise on the jewelry, all 3 weapon damage enchantments, all full stamina enchantments on the body pieces, infused weapon damage enchantment front bar, and absorb stamina enchantment back bar. This is basically the loadout I have on two-hander. On dual wield, things switch around, because you can just use a sharp and offhand and poison, but it's not important if you go for a two-hander. These two are basically the ones that I found the most useful, because you do not lose a lot of DPS by going for an absorb stamina enchantment, and you gain so much sustain back. It gives me 170 stamina per second, making sustain very easy on this build. As you can see, the difference between recovery and drain is pretty low, and so you can sustain pretty well even if you're an orc and using blue food this way. Alright, skill loadout. Let's start with the front bar. I have Blazing Spear here. It may seem a little bit weird to use Blazing Spear on a Stamplar, but the reason is that it procs Burning Light. Burning Light is a passive in the Edric Spear skill line that basically procs off every time you deal damage with an Edric Spear ability. There's a 25% chance that it deals an additional 6.3k physical damage for me, and it has a 0.5 seconds cooldown. The thing is, as a Stamplar, you have a couple abilities that actually are able to proc this. Empowering Sweep can proc it, and jabs proc it frequently while they're dealing damage, but you only jab for like a fraction of the rotation. So basically all the rest of the time you lose that possibility to proc this. That's why we're using Blazing Spear here, to basically in the time frame where we're not jabbing or having Empowering Sweep up, we're gonna be keeping Blazing Spear up. I'm gonna go through this in the rotation part a little bit more in detail, but this is basically why we're using this skill. The skill itself doesn't do a lot of DPS, but since it costs Magicka, it saves us stamina in comparison to another stamina ability, and it actually increases Burning Light DPS by a pretty neat margin, so it's very nice to have this in the rotation. The second one is the spammable Biting Jabs. It's full AoE. It is a channel, so it can be clunky to use sometimes, but it's still, it hits very hard. It is full AoE, procs Burning Light left and right, so it's very, very nice to have. It does a lot of damage. It grants you Major Savagery, which we don't really need, but still, it's nice to have. It's not that expensive. It's a channel. And yeah, it's pretty much the strongest spammable that a Templar has access to. I mean, it's melee, but still, it's very, very nice. The next skill is basically the flex spot where you put either Rearming Trap or Brawler. Rearming Trap on the Deadly Strike setup and Brawler on the Zorkwind setup. Here we have basically, this one is essential because it gives you minor force. If you don't have any other access to it, it deals a lot of damage, like 2.8k usually. Let's just go through to the Deadly Strike Parse here. Basically 800 from the direct hits, the double one, and roughly 2k DPS from the damage over time effect. So basically it deals a lot of damage in the time frame where it's active, and it gives you minor force, so it's a pretty good ability. The only downside is that it costs a lot of stamina, so it's a pretty big sustain drainer in the rotation. As you can see from the damage over time effects that I have in this parse here, consumption. Rearming Trap is the second highest after our spammable, and it's not far off. So using this is basically very, very sustain heavy. The next one is basically our rotation focus. This skill is what we're going to be focusing around. It lasts 6 seconds. Our entire rotation lasts roughly 12.5 to 13. So basically we're keeping this up all the time. We're casting this once when we come from the back bar to the front bar, and then before we go to the back bar again, we cast it again. But that's something I'm going to go through in the rotation part. This one is really, really nice. It has group utility because it provides debuffs that no other class has access to with Minor Fracture and Minor Breach. In many groups, healers started using it, but if you really want to play as Stamplar and your group allows you to, this is what you basically want to be focusing on because it provides damage to the group as well that you do not get from any other source. Then you have an initial hit, which is not that strong, but the biggest damage component is the copy damage that you deal after 6 seconds. So this ability cannot be recast early because then you lose the final copy damage hit. So basically you put this on, you see I have it tracked on surrender, it ticks down, and then after that 6 seconds you get the final damage. If I recast it early, it gives us the explosion sound, but it doesn't deal any damage. We can just observe it and let's just see combat. Let's just activate outgoing damage. So basically, yeah, initial hit. When I recast it early, I only get that one initial hit, but not the final explosion. Yeah, Stormfist blocking here. If I let it run out now, then I get the final hit again. But only if I let it run out the full duration. There is a slight margin where you can cast it early and it will still proc, but it's very narrow. So you want to make sure that this ran out before you basically recast it. It takes a little bit of time to get used to this, but it makes the Stamplar rotation interesting. It makes it fun to play because you have this debuff you always want to keep on the boss, and you center all your other skills around this because it's not only it has a good group utility, but it also has a lot of damage. It's like over 4.2k by casting this twice per rotation, plus the new group utility. So this is basically the essential skill that defines what Stamplar is. The next one is the biggest advantage of using a two-hander, because besides that we're not using any two-hander skill on this setup here. It's Executioner. I do not have the final rank of it because it scales up in damage the higher the rank is, so basically you need to add a little bit. This one is the Execute. We're going to start using this after like 27-26%, and then the rotation changes a little bit because you just keep Power of the Light, Rearming Trap, Blazing Spear, and then use Executioner. It's not really necessary to keep Blazing Spear up, but I still do it for the Burning Light procs and stamina save that you get. But you want to basically just keep Power of the Light up, Rearming Trap, and then spam Executioner as much as you can. This is a very strong single target execute ability. It's not as strong as the Nightblade execute, but it still gives other classes access to an execute, which they do not have on dual wield, besides the passive one that they have. So this is basically, especially when combined with Bloodthirsty, very, very strong ability that you definitely want to have if you use a two-hander. You can also use the other morph, Reverse Slice, if you need more cleave in arenas and dungeons. It can be really nice if you can cleave down adds, or if you use this ability on an ad that is already in execute and the boss gets the cleave damage, which is also quite nice. So you can do it both ways, and basically just choose whatever you need for the environment that you're in. The last one, Frontbar Ultimate, Flawless Dawnbreaker. This is just there for the passive. 8% weapon damage it provides us, 5% from the ability itself, and 3% from the Slayer passive in the Fighters Guild. So this one is basically, yeah, just there for, we're not using this actively, we're just having it there for the weapon damage. This is basically the front bar. The back bar starts with Endless Hail. These three skills are basically on stamina, always there on my builds, at least on the melee builds, and exactly that lineup. The reason for that lineup is that if you have a Maelstrom Bow and you want that bonus damage, you need to have Endless Hail as one of the first two abilities on the back bar. Ideally the first one, because if you cast it and bar swap before the first damage tick of Endless Hail hits, you're not gonna get the bonus damage. So you want to cast Endless Hail and then a few other abilities, so you make sure that the Endless Hail starts ticking before you go back to the front bar. So these two are the ground AoEs that you always want to have up, because they deal high single target damage, as you can see here in the Parse. Razor Caltrops, 3.7k single target plus a small initial hit, like 4k roughly. Endless Hail is pretty insane, 7.6k on this Parse here. So these two hit really hard, you definitely want to have them. The next one is Poison Injection, is also have an execute component, so you would see your damage go up a little bit if you use this. This is pretty useful as well. It's single target, but it is pretty strong as a damage over time effect. The next one is our Sustain tool, Restoring Focus. We're only recasting this every second rotation, even though it lasts 20 seconds. The thing is, 20 seconds does not really fit to a stamina rotation if you want to perform a static one that is simple to remember and simple to execute. So basically we're just using this every second rotation before exactly before we're using Empowering Sweep. So these two we basically line up all the time. You're going to see that when I go to the rotation part, where you basically will be going through the abilities one by one. The next one, Radiant Ward, is a pretty good defensive ability now that shields have resistances. On a Templar you get 30% of your max health protected, which is not bad. It costs magicka, quite a lot of magicka, but if you're in AoE situations and you hit a lot of enemies with this ability, you even get a stronger shield. Let me just test it here. The shield gets increased and it damages the enemy a little bit. So, and this can also proc Burning Light. If it does, it's nice, but it's basically just a defensive ability. You can also put Vigor here if you want a little bit a self-heal, or Repentance if you're like in a dungeon or trial, where you can basically use this to full effect to get Sustain back. Put Repentance here and basically just repent everything around you. The last one is our main ultimate. It's Empowering Sweep. We're going to use this every second rotation because it kind of fits to the cost that it has, 72 ultimate. This one gives you major protection, which is quite nice for 6 seconds. Basically, as soon as you hit one enemy, you get 7 seconds. 30% reduction in damage taken is very nice for a melee build, because you can basically, in that time frame, you take so much less damage. It's really nice, and the damage that the ability does is also quite nice, because it has 3 hits of roughly 5k plus 10k physical damage, so we have 25k damage in basically for a very cheap ultimate, which is yeah, very nice to have. Let's just look at how much DPS it provided. It's not that much. It's 1.7k in application in these parses here. Here it's a bit more, 1.7, 1.8k, but still the major protection makes it very worthwhile. And always consider in these Adric Spear abilities that, let me just delete this one and this one, that they also have a chance to proc Burning Light. So if they do, they basically contribute to the DPS you get from this too. So it's quite nice to have. And cheap ultimates also contribute to sustain, because they do not cost any stamina or magicka, so you basically save resources by casting ultimates more often. On this build, basically Mundus Stone wise, I go for the Lover, simply because with the Deadly Strike set, our critical chance isn't that high. We have 40, let's say on the dual wield bar, 40.8% critical chance. Basically with Major Savagery, if I just pop a potion, I have 50.8%. So our critical chance isn't really high, so that's why we're going with the Lover in this case. We do not have any other penetration source here. No Sharpen, no Sockvin's 4-piece penetration bonus. So basically, if you go for Deadly Strike set, you definitely want to go with the Lover Mundus Stone. With Sockvin's, it's very much on the brink. It depends on how much group support you have. If you have enough group support to get to the penetration cap without Lover and with Sockvin's and CP, then you can go for the Shadow. If you cannot get to the penetration cap with these, then you might want to go with the Lover as well, even though you have pretty high crit chance with Sockvin's. I think the crit chance with Sockvin's basically goes up to like 65% on the back bar, and on the mean we have like 61.4. So that's pretty like 4 to 5% above the break-even point where Shadow can beat Lover if you have the penetration cap. So it's quite nice. You have a choice. You can also go for Shadow with Deadly Strike, but only if you have enough debuffs to actually get to the penetration cap. The CP loadout a little bit. What I usually have here, I have 61 in Master at Arms, 56 in Thaumaturge, 56 Precise Strikes, 32 in Piercing, 56 in Mighty. These depend on your group loadout. If you have like really good debuffs, really high Alkosh uptime, 100% close to 100% Crusher with Infuse and Torux even, then you can take out a few points out of this one and put them into Thaumaturge or even into Precise Strikes. I have a few points into Physical Weapon Expert. It's not really necessary, but it basically boosts your light and heavy attacks by a little bit, which are a pretty high portion of your damage, as you can see here. Light attack from the bow bar, this is like 13% of your damage. So, and since you get diminishing returns with the other CP stars, it can be worthwhile putting some points into this one here. The thing is, if you use Deadly Strike, the damage done, the 14%, will be additive with Thaumaturge, which is why usually you'd expect in a build like this that I put more points into Thaumaturge than Master at Arms, because I focus on damage over time more than other builds do. But since the damage done from Deadly Strike is additive with this one, it has diminishing returns from basically from each other, which is why I put less points into Thaumaturge from CP, but you get more damage done on these damage over time effects simply by using the Deadly Strike set. So this is why I have more points into Master at Arms with direct damage than in Thaumaturge. The other two CP stars basically depend on the environments. I always put them like I mix them through pretty much, but if you go into a trial or like an arena or something, you can just look up on the internet. There's a lot of CP optimization charts and sheets and people that basically go through them all for different environments. So I'm not going to go through them again in every build that I do, so just look them up on the internet. They're pretty easy to find. Alcast has a lot of them on his website, so make sure to check that out if you want to optimize your CP distribution. Alright, let's get to the rotation. And this is basically pretty much the most interesting part. I'm having the Deadly Strike setup equipped now, as you can see, and we're going to go through the rotation step by step. So what I do is, let me just put on, it doesn't matter. What I usually do pre-fight is just activate Restoring Focus, and then you can go to the front bar and activate Rearming Traps, so you get it immediately as soon as the fight starts. So you can basically, in a trial or something, you can also put it down like before the boss even goes there, so it's pretty fine. Basically you want to activate Restoring Focus, Rearming Trap, go to the back bar, and then you start Endless Hail, Razor Caltrops, Poison Injection, and then you do Empowering Sweep, and then to the front bar again. And on the front bar, what we're doing is then, basically let's just go through this once on a dummy. So we're doing Restoring Focus, Rearming Trap, Potion, and then Endless Hail, Razor Caltrops, Poison Injection, and Empowering Sweep front bar. On the front bar, we're casting Power of the Light, Usually what I do then is I recast Rearming Trap again to make sure it has 100% uptime and it fits the static rotation that we have. So we do Power of the Light, Rearming Trap. Then I jab 2 times, and immediately after the jabs, Blazing Spear. We're not casting Blazing Spear before we do the jabs because it doesn't make sense. We have Empowering Sweep active before, then we go into the jabbing, which also procs Burning Light, and after we stop jabbing, Empowering Sweep is usually over. So then we need another source until we can cast the next Empowering Sweep or we jab again to basically be able to proc Burning Light again. So after the 2 jabs, I cast Blazing Spear, and then usually Power of the Light is ready again. Let's just do the rotation once on the front bar. Power of the Light, Rearming Trap, 2 times jabs, Blazing Spear, and then you can Power of the Light again. And then the rotation starts from scratch. So basically, you do the Power of the Light on the front bar, go to the back bar, Endless Hail, Razor Caltrops, Poison Injection, and then you're not activating the other 2 abilities because they have not run out yet. I'm gonna do the full rotation once so you see what I mean. Basically, Restoring Focus, Rearming Trap, Endless Hail, Caltrops, Poison Injection, and Empowering Sweep, Power of the Light, Rearming Trap, 2 jabs, Blazing Spear, Power of the Light, back bar, Endless Hail, Caltrops, Poison Injection. And now you see that these 2 skills have not run out yet. And what I do in that case, basically every second rotation is when you go from the back bar to the front bar again, you're not reactivating Restoring Focus and Empowering Sweep, but you're doing 1 jab on the front bar and then you can cast Power of the Light again. So let's go through it again. Restoring Focus, Rearming Trap, Endless Hail, Caltrops, Poison Injection, Empowering Sweep, Power of the Light, Trap, 2 jabs, Power of the Light, back bar, Endless Hail, Razor Caltrops, Poison Injection, 1 jab, and then Power of the Light is going to be ready again. So basically, usually when you have only 3 skills on the back bar and you cast Power of the Light before going to the back bar, you can see that basically it didn't run out yet. When you basically swap to the front bar again, you have roughly 2 seconds, so in that time you can jab and then after that recast Power of the Light. It fits pretty perfectly. And after you cast that Power of the Light, you do the regular front bar rotation. So let me just do 1 full rotation cycle so you see what I mean. Restoring Focus, Trap, Endless Hail, Caltrops, Poison Injection, Empowering Sweep, Power of the Light, Trap, 2 times jabs, Spear, Power of the Light, Hail, Caltrops, Poison Injection, Jab, Power of the Light, Trap, 2 times jabs, Spear, Power of the Light, Endless Hail, Razor Caltrops, Poison Injection, and now instead of the 1 jab on the front bar, we're casting the other 2 abilities. And then that is basically rinse and repeat until execute. In execute, basically the rotation changes because you do not want to keep up Blazing Spear anymore. You can, if you want to proc Burning Light on the front bar, but you do not have to. Basically what you do is you keep Power of the Light up because it has group utility, that's your rotation focus, you always want to have that up. And then you only recast Rearming Trap on the front bar to get that minor force in and the damage over time effect. So in execute, the rotation changes on the front bar. The back bar is still the same. Every second rotation you basically reapply Restoring Focus and Empowering Sweep. These 2 you always want to reapply because even with full execute benefit, Empowering Sweep has a higher tooltip than Executioner. Executioner can get up to a maximum of, I think, 22k tooltip in comparison to this one, 22, 23, and Empowering Sweep has more than that. So this basically, and it doesn't cost stamina, so this one you always want to keep up from the back bar. In execute, you keep up Endless Hail, Razor Caltrops, Poison Injection, and then if you see that you do not need Restoring Focus anymore because your stamina is full enough, you don't keep that up anymore, and you just use Empowering Sweep, Power of the Light, Rearming Trap, and then execute. So basically the execute rotation is Endless Hail, Razor Caltrops, Poison Injection, Empowering Sweep, Power of the Light, Rearming Trap, and then use Executioner 4 times until Power of the Light ran out, and then rinse and repeat. So it takes a little bit of time to get used to this rotation, but it's fully static. There's nothing dynamic about it because the two abilities here are always activated the second time when you go to the back bar. And so basically once you get used to the rotation, you can just do it until eternity. It's pretty easily sustainable. It deals a lot of damage, as you can see. My DPS tests are standardized. I have a macro buff slave that basically gives me some of the basic buffs that basically make it more comparable to other classes. So what it gives me is Minor Berserk, Major Fracture. So these are the basically Combat Prayer and Orbs. So these are basically the buffs I have in this, and it gets me to like roughly 54k DPS. I could probably farm a higher Parse, but I don't really have time to do all that stuff. So it deals quite a lot of rotation. I'm going to add the 2 Parses attached to it, like one with Sock-Winds, one with Deadly Strike. The problem I have with Sock-Winds still is that I was not able to drop a Greatsword. I only have a Maul, which basically when you look at the 2 Parses, let's just delete this one, the penetration level is vastly uneven. Usually I would like to have a Greatsword as well so I can make it more comparable to the other one. There's also a weird bug where my critical damage from Sock-Wind's Minor Force doesn't count. So as you can see, my critical damage on this Sock-Wind Parse is like 80%, and on the Deadly Strike set I have 10% more, which is very weird because it doesn't, somehow it just doesn't count the critical damage in the Minor Force I get from Sock-Winds. I don't know if there's a weird bug with it, or it basically overrides something else, or the Edric Spear doesn't count, but it's a weird bug where the 10% critical damage don't come in. So yeah, maybe with that critical damage counting in, or maybe it's just an UI error, I don't know. We might even have more damage, but these two are pretty comparable in terms of what they do. The difference is basically just that with Sock-Winds you roam with spot free, where you can drop Rearming Trap and use Brawler instead to get more survivability in. And a very nice AoE spammable as well. Basically you have an AoE spammable, but whenever you need survivability, and even in single target as a damage over time component, it's pretty nice. It did like 1.7k from casting it once per rotation, which is fine. It's not too high, but also not too shabby. So also quite nice. Yeah, this is it in terms of explanations for this build. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them below the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time. Cheers.